systems to help you improve compliance, reduce costs, and increase your profitability. By outsourcing your HR management functions, you gain an entire team of highly experienced and specialized professionals at a fraction of the investment required to have this expertise on staff. Our company is built on the idea of providing unparalleled service to the client. We are an organization with a small company feel and big company customer service standards. We offer HR management, benefits administration, payroll service, workers' compensation, risk management, hiring, recruiting support, and much, much more. Hopefully, many of you have been in contact with your local PEO, ESG, PSM, or Century 2, and have gotten this information through them and are using the resources in your HR professionals and payroll professionals that we offer for you. If not, certainly at the end of today's webinar, we hope that you do contact your representative with any questions that you might have regarding today's topics. So what we'll cover today. The agenda for today is going to be tips for some of today's scariest HR topics. What we find is a lot of our clients today having some of the most common issues regarding HR and keeping them up at night: recruiting, retention, employee handbooks, harassment and discrimination, FMLA and ADA, retaliation, and FLSA. Obviously, this is a lot of topics that we're going to be covering today, so we're not going to be covering all in depth, but actually just providing some of the tips and things that you can implement immediately, or some that you can plan on implementing to improve your processes and take some of the scariness out of HR. The first one we'll be covering is going to be recruiting and retention. Now, this first topic is certainly frightening, not knowing how to fill your open positions and keeping them filled. And by looking at the federal unemployment rate over the last few years, you can certainly see why. The unemployment rate has been drastically decreasing at the federal level, and most states have also been decreasing that throughout this same period, making it a challenge to be able to recruit and keep employees and get employees into your company. This information is last updated from September 2017. So just a few days ago, on October 20th, the Bureau did release the most recent stats for September, and the federal unemployment level has again decreased by just a little bit, down to 4.2%. Finding employees is very competitive when unemployment is this low. So it's very important that we focus on getting the right employees and retaining the ones that we do have. Because of this important topic, we will be covering a large portion of this on the retention and recruiting processes. First one is the recruiting sources. Recruiting sources, where you're starting and where you're searching for your employees. It's important now more than ever to evaluate your current methods. Are your methods out of date? Are you using some of the job boards that you've used in the past that maybe are not being as successful today? And when you're looking and evaluating these positions, are you getting the candidates that you're looking for? But more importantly, are you getting the qualified candidates that you're needing? When you're also evaluating the current methods and what you're using, you want to take a look at the cost of unfilled positions versus maybe the use of staffing and using staffing and recruiting companies. In this highly competitive market, taking that cost and maybe applying it to a staffing firm or a recruiting firm to help alleviate some of the pressures of finding candidates and qualified candidates can definitely help reduce your recruiting time and your screening time. And many of today's firms offer a guarantee of free replacements if the candidates do not work out with your company. So now not only do you have the opportunity to save time, but in the event that they provide your candidate that's not necessarily a fit for your company, they will replace that candidate within a certain amount of time for you. Looking at your current methods, there are now more job boards available that you can use and post for your company. The more exposure you can get to your ads, the more possible candidates that are actually looking for jobs and seeing your openings is important right now. When you're using your job boards, it's always a good idea to go on and search for your ad as if you were a candidate. This will then give you an idea of where's my ad coming up if I'm looking for a job in my market. Is it coming up on page 1, or is it 5 pages back at the bottom? All of these things are important when you're trying to reach as many candidates as possible and screen for the right candidates. Also, when you're looking for your ad and you find your ad, how does it compare to other similar jobs? You'll want to look at there. What are the other similar companies using for the same jobs? And are these ads maybe more attractive than compared to what you're doing? When you are using your job boards, get the training from your contact of these job boards. They offer a lot of different tools and tips that you can use to improve the exposure to your job opening. The more exposure you have, the more tools that you're using that they provide, and using that job board correctly is going to give you the maximum exposure to give you the maximum amount of candidates looking at your position and hopefully getting filled in the least amount of time. Social media. This is obviously an important one these days with social media, as almost everyone is somehow connected to the social media. If you've not started using the social media yet, you're missing out on a very important tool that your competitors are using already. Posting this job ad, your openings on sites like Facebook or your company Twitter account or LinkedIn, again, increases the exposure that's available. So many employees are spending so much time on social media, it only makes sense to use it for recruiting as well. A lot of employees, they will already create the link to their companies in their feeds and their company sites. So when they're getting the feeds from their social media and they see a job opening, it increases exposure for that employee to have a chance to remember somebody in their family or friends that's looking for a job and being able to refer that person to your company, increasing the referrals that you will get for using your job exposure and your candidates and getting them in. Send out to all of your groups and followers. Those individuals and other companies that are linked into your company and is a part of it, you can send out a mass distribution to all those followers and hitting a large population in the shortest amount of time. If anyone else has using a particular recruiting job technique that you find to be successful, feel free to send in the questions. Let me know what's out there, what you're using that you seem to be getting some success with. I'd be happy to share it with the group. Selection process. Once you've got the candidates, once you've been able to get them to your site and get the applicant in and getting the training, now getting the information from them, now being able to select the right hire is important. The cost to replace a hired new staff has been estimated as high as 60% of an employee's annual salary. That comes from SHRM. And then a recent study from PricewaterhouseCoopers, total cost of replacement, including training and loss of productivity, can range from 90% to 200% of employees' annual salary. Now, obviously, depending upon what metrics you're using, these numbers we've seen fluctuate, but I don't think it's uncommon for anyone to understand that there is a huge cost when it comes to replacing and new candidates, and the training and retention is even more important than ever. You just can't afford to make the wrong choice when it comes to hiring. So when you're doing your selection process, many companies are having their hiring managers do the interviewing and doing the selections. Be sure that you're training your hiring managers, updating them on their interviewing skills, getting them the tools that they need to be able to select the right candidate for the positions. Basic examples, making sure we're stop using the yes and no questions, getting the open-ended questions, and also using questions that are job related, very specific to what we're trying to accomplish in the company, how it's going to apply to the job, and getting that type of information from the candidate. skills assessments. One of the important tools of being able to make sure you've selected the right hire is having the proper skills assessments, evaluating where the employee, the candidate fits in what you're needing to fill the job. Will they be successful in having the right tools coming in, or is it something that you'll have to invest in training to get their skills up to level? Personality profiles, another assessment, another type of selection tool that you can use anytime to find out, are they a match for your company? Are they a match for this position specifically? There are many different tools and assessments and personality profiles out there with many different companies that offer specific industry or topic or job related assessments and profiles that can help you with that selection process. Now, anytime you are using any type of assessment, whether it's skills assessments or personality profiles, you certainly want to make sure that you vetted these assessments carefully, making sure that you aren't having any type of discrimination issues, whether they be intended or unintended. Getting the proper training and instruction from those vendors and from those assessments is really important in making it sure that you get the selected hire using those tools properly. Once we've got the selection, we've got the candidate, the onboarding experience really becomes an important part of retention. From the very first day, how does that employee feel with your company? Do they feel like they belong? How do they feel like they can succeed? And having that onboarding experience available to them is very important in the retention process. Aberdeen Group recently had a study that 86% of new hires make their decisions, should I stay or should I go, in the first 6 months. This onboarding experience is relative to these first 6 months and making sure that the employee is getting assimilated and realizing that they have made a good choice with your company as the same as you making a good choice with your selection. The onboarding experience. How does that begin? What is the importance of that when it comes to the selection process or retention process is making sure that you're prepared. Part of that preparation involves the pre-boarding process. Getting ready, making sure when that candidate hits your door that they hit the door running and you're not looking like you don't have anything prepared for them. It wasn't important for you to have them ready and up and running right away when they get in the door. So part of that pre-boarding planning should involve a scheduling a 90-day onboarding plan. Have that ready. Have that available so you're following something for this employee. The employee can also follow that plan and understand when you present it to them what's in plan and what's in store for them in their first 90 days. Having computer logins and supplies, getting those ready. Having the opportunity to be able to sit down and not have to wait for help desk or wait for a computer to come in, having everything set, ready to go so the employee knows that they can sit down and begin a productive day at work their very first day. Another good tip is selecting a mentor. Selecting a mentor, giving that person an immediate contact, an immediate connection with someone that can help them. When you're selecting a mentor, you'll want to follow some basic guidelines of having a positive person. You know, having someone that's going to present your company and that department and your supervisory leadership in the best light. And also it gives a new candidate an opportunity, new employee an opportunity to ask the silliest of questions. Sometimes a new candidate might not feel comfortable going to their supervisor and asking certain questions, but having someone as a mentor right there beside them that they can feel more comfortable asking the silliest of questions, getting those basic answers that are causing them any type of stress on their first day, creates almost an automatic friend. And anytime you can create a connection with an employee within your group or your department, it's a great way to make sure that you retain that new employee. Calling the new hire, picking up the phone before the first day, giving them a call, making sure everything's fine, letting them know on that first day, here's a place to park, here's where you can go, We've got a mentor set up for you. This person's really excited working with you. There's plenty of places to bring your lunch, or be sure to bring your lunch tomorrow. A lot of the things that new employees have on that first day that can cause a lot of stress, and giving that extra attention can really be a positive impact on the employee experience. Email the new hire. Let them know this information that you've gotten, that you have prepared for them, their 90-day plan, some of the company materials, additional things that they can look at in advance, have that information, and be prepared and knowing that it's important for you to give them that information about the company on their first day. Managing that welcome experience. Hopefully it doesn't look like this. A stack of paperwork in front of you, a bunch of papers to sign in an office by yourself can really be a difficult first day at work. So you want to make sure you're managing that first day experience, managing that onboarding experience, and keeping it positive and keeping it productive for the employee. Part of that, managing that welcoming experience, going through those transactional elements, making sure they go smoothly, making sure they have all the supplies they need, where to find things, where they can go to with questions, how they manage their way around the building. A welcome sign, a handwritten note, welcome them to the new position, into their role. Certainly a personal touch that adds to the excitement of an employee, having that opportunity that you've taken the time to welcome them on their first day of the job. Then giving them the company information, the mission, the role, how their role will fit into the big picture. Every employer wants to know how they contribute and what their personal achievement can do for the company and how they can contribute to the team overall. Giving this big oversight and specific about the company and how their role fits in it can be a real positive impact on the employee's new onboarding experience. Retention. Some of the key points in retention is the first line supervisors. And it's always important that we're keeping the employees that we have. And as your first line supervisors, they're the first line of defense. They're the ones usually in contact, or should be in regular contact with their employees, giving them feedback, asking them how things are going. Not just waiting for the annual review and telling them at the end of the 1 year of what was good and what was bad. The more effective the communication and the more real time that this communication can be is a way of keeping employees engaged at work and satisfied and being able in connection with their supervisor that they are being a contributing employee to their department or their company's success. Effective communication. Just as important as regular communication is making sure your first line supervisors are trained on effective communication with their employees. Keeping the information not only positive or reinforcing, or if it's negative, even constructive, but how to effectively communicate improvement or correction activity or corrections with the employee is important as well. Retention, stay interviews. So we're all familiar with exit interviews where we're using it after the employee has left, finding out the information of why did you leave, what could we have done differently, what is your favorite things about the company, what's the things that you like least about it, trying to give us some information about the way an outgoing employee has about the company. And depending upon that situation that the employee left, that communication can be used, or it could also be slanted. So you have to make sure that you are getting the information and using it properly and taking it in proper perspective. But a stay interview while the employees are there, having that opportunity to sit down, discuss with your employees, asking them specifically how things are going. How is the position going? What are the good things? Have you seen any ideas for improvement? Getting their feedback while they're there keeps them engaged, keeps them informed, and keeps them the opportunity to make sure that you're going to retain them as an employee going forward. So following some of these tips, hopefully will keep your positions filled and some of the monsters out of your retention and recruiting nightmares. Next is the employee handbook. The employee handbook can also be an effective tool, especially when it comes to communication, to retain employees, not only from the new orientation employee onboarding experience, but also for retaining employees, knowing that it's laying out what to expect of them and what's in the company's mission and their values and how they can be a part of that. It also opens a line of communication, letting the employee know if you have an open door policy, where they go, that your company welcomes this type of feedback, who they can contact, and what their objectives are as far as when it comes to getting information, asking the right questions. It can also reinforce your culture. What kind of company are we here? What do we expect from our employees? What can our employees expect from us? And building that positive bond in the culture, in with that employee, keeping that employee understanding the roles that they have and being able to retain that employee. The company mission, again, an opportunity to put in writing what that mission is, what the company stands for, what their values are. This is all important when an employee is trying to decide about staying with the company and making the connection that and the bonds that they have with the company and what the company stands for. These things inside of an employee handbook give that a very specific place to learn more about the company and what's expected. The rules and expectations. This here gives them a good opportunity and you as a company to be able to let them know, here's the behavior we're expecting, here's how you can be a positive contributor to our company, here's also the things that we don't approve of, and some of the things that won't, if you participate in these type of activities, will not be favorable in your employment here. So giving those rules on the outset and expectations about what the company policies are and what the employee is expected to follow and not follow, it certainly is a good communication tool for retention. And along those expectations, helping prevent the problems before they occur. Giving that on the outset, these are the rules, knowing what the attendance policy is, so you aren't having to deal with after it of explaining the attendance policy or explaining the improper use of technology or the computers. These things in the handbook can certainly save you much time when it comes to dealing with things after they've already happened and explaining what the rules are and having employees wonder or guess maybe what the policies are, if it's allowed at this company, maybe the same way it was allowed at their last company, or is this company different and do they expect different things? Also put some responsibility on the employee. It gives them the opportunity to take control of these rules and their actions and knowing what it is that they've been provided the guidelines and the expectations and that they are expected to follow them and how they can follow them. These type of things is certainly an opportunity now for the employee to have some onus and some burden on making it a positive work experience for them and a positive way to build your company and your retention. And the employee handbook will also give certain support that you do intend to comply with the laws. As the nightmares and the scariness of employee suits and audits and anything that can cause liability for financial, this document here would certainly give you the opportunity to state the federal laws, to state the state laws that you might have, and to know that the employee has the opportunity to know that you are intent on following these laws and they are important part of your company culture, and that you do intend on complying with all federal, state, and local laws. One of the scariest things about handbooks is having to update them and get them reviewed. But it's an important part of the handbook process. Reviewing them annually. Laws change on a regular basis. And it's important that every year that you have it looked at, and is it current now with all of the recent updates in the law? And has it actually taken into account any court appeals processes that may have overturned some recent laws? These appeals court decisions, as we know, definitely lay the framework of what were expected and what the laws were and how they change when it comes to the appeals court and how we expected certain laws to be carried out and the different nuances that happen in the appeals process. And you want to update policies that are too restrictive, that make it almost impossible to follow. The idea is to, a lot of companies want to make sure that we've tied in every little loophole that the employee could possibly think of to get away with stuff. And it really becomes an unmanageable process if that's the objective. So being too restrictive that managers can't possibly keep up with all of the things inside of the handbook because don't have the time to actually execute what's in there. So being able to remove those type of items out of the handbook and make it so it's not as restrictive and that your handbook actually reflects what your company is practicing, not how you wish it would operate, but actually how it does operate. This gives you the best success when it comes to dealing with employee issues in the handbook, making sure it properly reflects the actual environment in the company. And overly broad, when it comes to that, the NLRB has certainly made many, overturning many different policies, stating that some of your policies inside of your handbook are too broad, and that it might infringe on an employee's being able to, their protected right of being able to discuss things of their concerning their employment and the conditions of employment. A lot of examples that we've seen lately is the social media policies or complaining about your work conditions or posts on social media about a company, about a supervisor, about a manager, and having policies inside the handbook that are actually reflective of, being do not complain about do not complain about your work conditions, do not talk about your salary or your pay. These things are confidential. So some of these type of policies the NLRA has ruled on that indeed they should be. They're overly broad, and you need to make them a little more specific so that it is not infringing on an employee's right regarding complaining about terms and conditions of employment. And your social media policy, how that impacts your handbook, is it ever changing? And the different types of social media that we see are evolving and are out there, making sure that your employees have your understanding of what the company policy is regarding social media and what their posting is, responsibilities are, and when they're representing the company or not representing the company are important things to make sure that are outlined within your social media policy in the handbook. So watching out for some of these employee handbook updates and keeping on top of your employee handbook can certainly help keep you sleeping comfortably at night. Harassment and discrimination. If these two issues are lurking somewhere in your company, it does give you reason to be afraid. Some of the tips helping with the HR scariness of harassment and discrimination always starts with a good policy. Having a good policy in place that outlines what harassment and discrimination is and how it's not allowed in the company, prohibited from the companies, and explaining what actually is considers what words, things that fall underneath the harassment and discrimination policy. Very specific examples makes it very clear to the employee about and supervisors about what is not allowed in the harassment and discrimination. Training the employees and supervisors. This is very important to make sure that every employee has had a training on what harassment is, what discrimination is, and how the company is against any type of harassment and any type of discrimination. And training them all the different types of forms that this harassment and discrimination could fall under. Having that information and knowing what is a harassment or a discrimination and how it can lead to a claim is important. Your first line of defense, your supervisors, they're the ones that are going to have the most interaction and communication and visually see and hear things that are going on in the company. So making sure that they're aware of all those policies and what the legal laws are regarding harassment and discrimination in Title VII, that they're applying those and watching out for your company and being a good steward. Part of the training of the supervisors and employees is also letting them know to report something if they hear or see something that is inappropriate, even if it's not applying directly to them. One of the goals is making sure that anyone is being protected in your company, that it's a safe environment for employees to work. And if someone notices that someone might be violating that policy, it's important to get it reported so that it can be investigated properly and that we're ensuring a safe environment for all the employees. And even if the employee isn't sure, training that even if they're not sure if it violates the policy, but a lot of times it just doesn't feel right or just didn't seem like it went the way you would expect a conversation to go, then reporting those things are okay too. This gives you the most exposure to be able to train and handle harassment and discrimination claims on the front end and dealing with them before they become a liability in the legal realm. Having a good complaint policy. Giving the employee the opportunity and the instructions about how to complain about one of these harassment or discrimination issues is important. Giving them the proper avenues. Maybe allowing them multiple reporting options. Something that every employee handles these issues differently, and giving the more opportunity or the more different reporting options you can give to them, you're more likely you're going to be able to have them feel comfortable in providing a complaint to both of these two serious issues. Also, what is the supervisor's responsibility with the complaint? Training your supervisors when you do get a complaint. What is their role? What are they supposed to do with it at that time? There's been several instances where a supervisor might have gotten a complaint, but instead of passing it on to the proper person to handle it, they might have made a decision already that, well, it didn't seem like it was that big of a deal. Or maybe they heard the complaint and then decided, I'll be sure to get to it on Monday when I get back, or from the weekend or back from vacation, and then it falls off or it's forgotten and it doesn't get properly investigated. So these training for the supervisors and letting them know here's the responsibility and why it's important for the company to really investigate all forms of complaint and take them all seriously and make sure that they are investigated so that you are avoiding any legal action as best as possible down the road. Having a good investigation procedure. So once you have received a complaint, making sure that you're following a very consistent process of interviewing, follow-up, asking the right questions, and getting the investigation complete. Part of that good investigation procedure, when you're giving proper training for the individuals talking or having the investigations or interviewing the employees in these investigations. Important part of the investigation process is getting the information and learning to discern what the employee not only is saying, what they're trying to say, and maybe what they're not saying. A good investigation procedure will also train on how to explain the confidentiality portion of the investigation. There are certain circumstances where you can't guarantee complete confidentiality, but certainly the investigator, the interviewer should be able to explain that to the employee to let them understand here are the things, not only from a confidentiality standpoint, but also coming from a complaint, protected, concerted activity, that employees can discuss certain things within an investigation depending upon the type of investigation that it is. It's not a bad idea to have a third-party investigator. Recently in the news, we've certainly heard of internal investigations on harassment and discrimination that maybe have not completely uncovered all of the information that was necessary to provide a full report. Having a third party on the most serious of matters could be a very valuable tool, making sure you're having someone with an objective, accurate account of the investigation and being able to report that accurately. And all investigations should have some sort of summary report that's consistent with every type of investigation that you've done. Having that summary report available, allowing employees or supervisors or investigators to complete the process, have it documented, have it in a place where you can review in the event that another similar circumstance has come up. How did you treat this one? How are we treating this investigation similarly? Making sure you're getting very consistent process when it comes to investigations and your follow-up and any actions taken as a result of any investigations are being consistent. FMLA, ADA. Anytime there's a lot of letters and no words, it can be a scary situation, just trying to remember what actually each letter represents. But it's still important that everyone gets trained on what these laws are and how they impact the company. I know I've said it many times, but the training of the supervisors on FMLA and ADA, what the law is, what it requires, these are important things that every supervisor should know as a first line to the employees. Having this information and knowing that what they can say and what they shouldn't say is important. When an employee is coming to these type of matters, that it's their protected right and inherent right for FMLA, that we're not doing anything or saying the wrong things that might change that or that might influence about what an employee volunteers or comes to the supervisor about. And also training the employees, letting them know of their right. That's just as important. If you are FMLA eligible company, having that information so that the employee knows what those laws are governing their protected right for FMLA. FMLA interference. FMLA interference is gaining a lot of traction in EEOC cases. FMLA interference particularly states anything that interferes or might prohibit an employee from their inherent right of FMLA leave. There have been cases right now that have been thrown out of summary judgment and put back into the court, into the jury's hands for FMLA interference. 3 of these cases today, the employee actually did receive FMLA leave. They were granted the leave. Everything went fine, yet there's still an EEOC claim and a legal claim for FMLA interference. And that's right. So just to be clear, the employee received FMLA, but the case has gone to the courts about FMLA interference. And so, well, how is that possible if they actually got it? Your supervisors and who they're talking to regarding FMLA to their employees is important. In these instances, the employee has gone to the supervisor and maybe requested that they're going to need FMLA leave, and the supervisor's response might be something, well, that's going to be really put a hurting on our production this week. I don't know if we can afford it. Or, well, I know the higher ups certainly don't look favorably upon being away from work, but go ahead and apply. So these type of comments, the courts have said, is it up to a jury to decide whether this would reasonably interfere with the employee's right next time to maybe apply, if this is going to impact their continuing employment, if they're using their inherent right of FMLA, that this interference might prevent them reasonably from applying or for that inherent right that they have. And the ADA interactive process. Americans with Disability Act, the EEOC has certainly expanded its definition and inclusions of what is a debilitating medical condition, training your supervisors on listening and hearing and what the employee is saying about any type of medical condition, and making sure that they aren't saying the wrong things about a disability or putting the employee in a different position or because of a perceived disability and how it might impact the job of the essential functions of the job can have a serious effect on the legal ramifications of ADA. Part of ADA is making sure when someone does request some accommodation is involving in the interactive process. So the EEOC has clearly stated that if you have not been involved in the interactive process, you are in violation of ADA. So being able to understand the interactive process and being fair business dealings when it comes to the interactive process and the discussions when it comes to reasonable accommodations for employees is important training to have, and an understanding of how to handle the ADA process will certainly keep your company protected from harmful lawsuits about ADA violations. Anti-retaliation. It's probably no surprise that there has been a rise in EEOC retaliation claims. EEOC covers a lot of equal opportunity cases, and it expands every day on what the discrimination and the laws prohibit and who is covered and who is protected. And so the retaliation for expressing or being a part of any of these has certainly been in a rise with the EEOC. So not only can you be in violation of EEOC, but you can also then be compounded on by taking retaliatory action against someone who is in a protected class from legal issues. So one of the key components is having a good policy. That good policy is outlining very specifically about retaliation and how it's prohibited with the company. And having this policy explain what it is what retaliation is, and how the company does not allow retaliation, and that the employee can be expected to be free of retaliation during this any complaint that they've made with the company. So training your supervisors, again, that first line of defense. What is retaliation? What can be perceived as retaliation? How this can impact the employee, how it can impact the company, and how to avoid making decisions about an employee's employment condition that might be perceived as retaliation. Many times, some of the decisions we make may not have anything to do with retaliation. However, the proximity of when that decision was made to the actual complaint can make it look like it's a retaliation. So even though an employee was subject to be transferred to a different department or a different area, or maybe even a different job, if the employee had a recent complaint and then the employment action of moving that employee is taken place, you could see where it's possible that the employee would want to make the connection that this action that you've taken is actually a retaliation for my complaining of these actions from the company. And it comes in many different forms, whether it's specifically related to the conditions of the job, hiring, promotions, certain job tasks assigned more favorably to someone than the other, even as simple as communication. Complaining a supervisor taking a different approach than he or she normally would when dealing with an employee can look like retaliation. Maybe after a complaint, the supervisor no longer gives the very specific training and follow-up and communication that is in their normal behavior with an employee who's made a complaint versus any other regular employee. Or maybe the supervisor has taken upon themselves to think that, well, maybe I just need to give this employee some space. Maybe give them some time so that I'm not in there causing more harm in the communication. Where the intent was probably good at the beginning, the retaliation can certainly be made a case that the employee can be seeing that they're now just being ignored, and this is a form of retaliation that could cause action for a claim. And when it comes to retaliation claims or any claim of complaint regarding an employee that's provided or followed the complaint policy and procedure, it's always a good practice to always follow up with the employee, see how things are going, check in since the complaint, ask them if they've noticed any types of retaliation. This type of follow-up and communication with the employee can be invaluable when it comes to fighting off retaliation claims and finding out about them and knowing them in advance in order for the company to take the proper action. Overtime regulations. This was definitely a hot topic a couple of years ago when we started this. There's a good chance your company had probably already started the process when the regulations were in place to increase the salary level. Currently now, this is under review again by the DOL. There have been no updates or changes at this time. And so having a full understanding, as we expect that this Department of Labor will implement something, if you haven't had a chance already to look at your exemptions and overtime exemptions, it's always a good time to do it now and have your classifications in order. The overtime exemptions, one of the ones that really seems to give employers the most trouble is the administrative exemption. And probably one reason is the other exemptions themselves get pretty specific regarding the professional exemption and licensing and advanced training, the outside sales exemption for outside salespeople, the executive exemption for anyone that is supervising 2 or more individuals. But when it comes to computer professionals, their job as a computer professional and what their role is. But when it comes to the administrative exemption, this is where it's important to just take a good close look and get the best business decision you can regarding that overtime exemption. 2 of the things that really focuses on when it comes to the administrative exemption is, does this job require independent judgment and discretion? So how is this employee acting and making decisions about their job and about decisions with the company. Are they being guided? Are they given specific guidelines? Or are they actually using their own judgment and discretion when it comes to making decisions within the company? But not only is it the independent judgment and discretion, but also involving significant business matters. So these two things together create a gray area on what actually is included when it comes to how do you determine it's an independent judgment and discretion and it involves significant business matters. Having a good review of your overtime exempt employees, making sure that they're falling under the administrative exemption, that you're doing a really thorough review. Maybe you've had a legal review of it as well, just to make sure that you're getting the best decision when it comes to applying that administrative exemption and what your options are. I would expect once these changes do go into place again by the Department of Labor that we would see an increase in audits and obviously audits take place, and when audits take place, fines get handed out. So having your information in order regarding the overtime exemption rules is certainly something, if you haven't done already with the previous regulations that are now have been overturned, but do so for the current ones that everyone's expecting to become here shortly. And then the on the clock, off the clock timekeeping issues. This is certainly one that is important to train your supervisors on what they're instructing their employees to do, whether it's working off the clock, not taking of their breaks, not taking their lunchtime, working from home, working on their way from home, on the car, working on the commute back and forth, answering emails. In today's mobile society and all of our technology, it's so much easier now to get and receive and make phone calls, to receive emails, texts, all things that are related to employment and should be accurately compensated for, and keeping track of that and making sure your supervisors are aware of these instructions about how they keep track of and how they instruct their employees about timekeeping issues. And from an employer standpoint, checking back in or sending out reminders to employees about the off the clock and time clock keeping issues is just as important as well. Showing that you do consider this important, that you do expect employees to comply with the overtime and regulations, and making sure that they are being compensated accurately. So hopefully today, giving you some tips that some you can apply right away, or some that you can plan on applying that can help make your employee experience and your HR scariness go away, allowing you to sleep comfortably at night. Well, if you do have any questions, feel free to submit them on the question line, or I can also direct you right back to your PEO with some wonderful professionals at Employer Solutions Group, Century 2, and Professional Management. Contact your representatives there, ask them the questions, and we're happy to help you in any way that we can. Just a reminder, this session is being recorded, and it will be available on our link in case you have missed portions of it or you want to have it shared with someone else. You can certainly go to the website, company website, and this should be up in a couple of days where you will be able to listen to this recording once again. At the conclusion of the webinar, we will also send you out the copy of the slides that you will have from today's presentation. Thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. We look forward to seeing you again in our webinar series of HR updates and company updates, and we hope to see you attend. Look forward to these updates of our next one coming soon. Thank you.